Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to the front line with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo, as always, joined by Joe Resinello. And once more, dear brothers and sisters, let us go into the breach on the Crusade channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com, the last live radio station standing. Remember that the chat room is open at crusadechannel.com/chat. And we would also ask you to help us out at the front line with Joe and Joe. Frontline TV, the Frontline TV on YouTube. That's the primary social media platform that Joe and I, along with our producer, Jonathan Ross, up in Canada, we're really trying to build that up. So we would ask you to do that. As far as the Crusade channel is concerned, we always emphasize a premium membership is something that you ought to do. All right, you have Mike Church, Rick Barrett, Frontline with Joe and Joe. You have the Kennedy Profession, okay? You have a lot of great content. The Crusade channel is not a radio station. It's a cause, okay? And we have to get behind it. Joe and I do. We would encourage you to do that also. Go to crusadechannel.com. Listen for free. Kick the tires. Look under the hood. And we guarantee you, you're going to want to become a premium member of the Crusade channel. And finally, please download the Veritas Catholic Radio Network mobile app so that you can have access to all of Veritas Catholic Radio, which is up in Connecticut. Joe and I have a Sunday afternoon, 5 o'clock in the afternoon interview show that we do on Veritas Catholic Radio Network, but you could download it, all right? And because you could download it, you don't have to be there at 5 o'clock. You can listen to it whenever you want. We have a bunch of interviews up there, and we got a lot of great interviews coming. So we really appreciate all your support. Joe Resinello, we're fighting a culture war. Anybody who doesn't see that is blind. You're really blind, okay? Now, some people, Joe, call it a culture war, which I think is appropriate. Others call it a spiritual battle. I think it's both, okay? Because we fight the spiritual battle more through the culture than we do through the politics. Obviously, I think we all know that. That's a lesson of the last, let's say, for argument's sake, couple of 100 years. Don't fight political battles. Win the culture is what we have to do. And Anthony Esselin, he had a great article in Crisis Magazine, basically saying that our moral edifice has fallen. And he talks about, years ago when he was in college, okay, and or when he was a kid, and the different views of, let's say, sexual morality, because that is the source of our problems, no matter what anybody wants to say. Conservatives, by the way, Joe Resinello, don't want to admit that either, okay? That sexual morality is the source of all our problems. And that goes for politics, economics, and a whole host of other things. So Esselin talks about that. And also Austin Ruse also had an article in Crisis talking about Michael Warren Davis's new book, The Reactionary Mind. Now, Joe, reactionary is a word that, as you and I were growing up, that was a bad thing to be. Me, I hope they call me a reactionary now. I hope they say you're a reactionary. You want what I'm going to say? You're damn right. You're damn right I'm a reactionary. Here's the thing, Joe Resinello. We're going to tie this into one of the solutions that we have, which is we have to get to the younger people, particularly those out there, college campuses and the like, okay? Joe, look, we were all young. We get it. Nobody's a Puritan here. Nobody's a prude, okay? But the bottom line is this crap is destructive. I want to read you something, Joe. The reality is that most Catholic colleges are like secular colleges. I don't think that that's in doubt one bit. The kind of sexual encounter now presumed by our hookup culture is virtually indistinguishable from a scene in a porn movie. It's often anonymous, but certainly impersonal and undertaken without commitment. Its default expectation is that both people will mutually use each other's bodies for pleasure, sometimes violently, and will almost always involve choice inhibiting intoxication. Whatever, now here's the key, Joe, whatever our politics and whatever our gender, our culture's sexual practices are desperately calling out for a renewal. And as an Easter people, all of us must do a better job answering that call. Joe, that description right there is spot on.
Oh, I agree.
And it used to be that if you did those things in college, it was frowned upon. At the very least, it wasn't exalted to the level of something that you should do. Anthony Esselin's basically saying whatever moral edifice was left is gone. And we have to do something. Because, Joe, if that building is gone, if that edifice is gone, then we have to rebuild it. You're not going to refurbish an already broken down building that's already destroyed. We're going to have to build a new one. Joe Rossinello, what say you?
Well, there's a lot there to talk about. I mean, we could talk first about Catholic colleges acting like secular colleges. I mean, if anyone out there who wants to send their kid to a truly authentic Catholic college, they should look to the Newman List. I mean, ultimately, I went to a Catholic college. It was an absolute and utter free-for-all, period. End of story. I mean, I don't understand why parents feel the need. I mean, where I live, there are a lot of colleges, good colleges that you could commute to. And I understand that a lot of places in the US don't have that luxury. You do have to stay there. But I'll tell you this. I mean, it's nothing short of a free-for-all, like I said,
Right.
Catholic colleges. And people look at it, a lot of parents, it's like a rite of passage, a rite of passage for your kid to drink like to points of like blacking out,
Right.
people having sex, like I mean, is this what you want your daughter or your son to do? I mean, and you're paying a premium. And here's another thing, Joe. It's all schools. From Harvard, I had friends at Penn. I spent many weekends at Penn. It goes on. It's from the best schools down to the lowest schools. And people, parents, that like they willingly send their kids to these schools. And frankly, if you ask me, they don't move forward in terms of development. They actually regress. And it doesn't matter how smart you are. It doesn't matter what school it is. It's just the truth.
Joey, it used to be, okay, that spring break, whatever, obviously, like I said, spring break is party time. Dude, why do you got to go on spring break nowadays? It's every day on a college campus.
Oh, there's no question about it.
Listen, you could pull all the you could pull all the chicks you want. Sorry, feminists, that's the way we talk. You could pull all the chicks you want out of a party, drink as many beers as you want, get as high as you want. Administration's not going to say anything about it. On a Catholic campus, the administration's not going to say anything about it. There's no real security. Why do you have to go to Mexico? Why do you have to go waste more of your parents' money? You're doing it on campus nowadays.
Well,
And the shame of it
funny.
is, Joe, it's Catholic schools that maybe used to be somewhat distinguishable are not.
It's funny. I was just I just had my fifth kid, and I was talking to the nurse in Hackensack Hospital, very nice young woman, and she was not too young, she was in her 40s, but she had a daughter who's going to Montclair State, which is near us, and she's like, she lived there, or does she commute? She's like, no, she commutes. I have this thing about date rape. And me and my wife were talking to her, and it's like, this is what is real. I mean, like, it's off the hook behavior that's going on. And I'm not knocking college, but what I am saying is a lot of these kids, and I went to college, trust me, I know the deal. They're not mature enough at 18 to basically behave properly. A very small percentage. It doesn't matter how smart you are. So get that right out of your head. People
but Joe, the ones
assume,
but the ones who are
smart.
No, you're right. But the ones who are smarter, Joe, are the ones usually that were in high school studying real hard, getting 1,500 on their SATs, and they're not the ones pulling chicks out of parties and drinking beers in college. Those are the kids that are in college that are probably studying their ass off. All right.
Well, I'll tell you what. I used to go to Lehigh, which is an engineering school, and Joe, it was off the hook, partying off the hook. And these guys were very, very, very bright. And Lehigh is a very competitive school. And I had friends at Penn. I probably spent 10 weekends at Penn off the hook.
Right.
I mean, you're spending, a friend of mine at work just finished sending his kid to Boston College. That's at $78,000 a year.
Right.
I mean, you're spending $300,000 close to it.
Right.
To send your kid to basically behave like a savage. And your daughter is going to be in that, whether you like it or not, she's in that mix. And I'll be honest with you, I just don't see it. Listen, I'm all for higher education, believe me. But at the same time, what's going on these campuses is, I'll be honest with you, I don't know why parents are so thrilled to say, oh, my kid's going here, my kid's going there. You know something? Guess what's going on over there? Even if they're getting good grades, and it's not good.
Right. And you know what? A lot of parents, I don't care who they are, Joe, a lot of parents would say, all right, but they're kids. They're going to do what they're going to do. No, you're their parent. It's like we talk about on the show at the Frontline with Joe and Joe all the time at the Crusade channel, always on air and always online. How about no? How about no for an answer? How about no? How about like when I grew up? Or how about it like this? How about a little bit before we grew up? Girl goes off to college. Hey, you keep your legs closed or I break your ass. That's what the old Italians used to say to their daughters if they sent them to school. I break your face. Okay. You can't say that now. You'll get arrested, of course, because you for a variety of reasons. But you know what? It was good enough. It was good enough in many cases to let a kid know, no, no, no. You're still under the watchful eye of your parents, even when you go to school. No, you don't just do what you want. Who the f do you think you are? Now, again, Joe, this is 50, 60, 70 years ago. But nowadays, you're going to go to Boston College, you're going to spend $78,000 of my money, and then you're going to tell me that you need to be free, you need to be me? Well, you could go to community college. I'm not sending you to Boston College for that.
Well,
You're not going to go away to school,
that.
Joe, and you're not going to be disciplined. If you're not going to actually think in your mind that you're going to carry over the values that you were taught, and you're going to go to school and you're going to reject those values, go pay for your own damn education.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. And not to mention, I mean, a lot of these schools, particularly some of the liberal arts schools that aren't Catholic, I mean, your kid, the likelihood if they go into that school as a Catholic, coming out Catholic is very slim. It's slim to none. I've watched that with people that I knew from high school that went to some of these schools. I mean, they pump your head full of so much crap in plain English. I mean, you won't even.
You're talking about Catholic schools.
No, I'm talking about basically liberal arts schools that are not Catholic. There are a number of them out there. They're very good. But
Right.
what's it called? I mean, at the end of the day, those kids come home. You don't even recognize your kid anymore. I mean,
Right.
the way that, like, and again, you're paying for this. You're paying for this. I mean, ultimately, the sad reality is college in America has to be rethought. I mean, there was a time my dad, who recently passed, he would be, if he was still with us in his 80s, guys in his, class who went to college. I mean, you had to be pretty smart. Let's
Mhm.
be honest with you. You had teachers, colleges, like, local schools if you're going to be a teacher or a nurse, but you had to be pretty smart. Nowadays, it's just like punching a ticket. A third of the kids that go to college shouldn't even be there because,
Right.
frankly, when they get out, they're not going to use the degree at all. The other third, another third, they're studying things they're not going to get a job in. And frankly, they're wasting their parents' money. I
Right.
mean, or they're going to have to go to more schooling. And if you don't have that money, that means more debt. And then
Right.
there's the third that's actually studying something that's going to get them a job. They're looking to be an engineer, an architect. They're studying chemistry. They're studying information
They
sciences,
want to be a
accounting,
doctor. They want to be a doctor.
biology.
Right.
Outside of that, I'm going to be honest with you. If you don't know what you want to do, you're not going to school. You go to community school and think about it. Join the service. Do something. It's too expensive.
Right.
It's frankly too expensive. Listen, I lived it. I studied political science. I had to go get a graduate degree. It
Right.
did work for me, though, in the sense that I did get a professional job. And I mean, I didn't make tons of money, but I made a decent
Right.
living. But a lot of kids, it just doesn't. And
Right.
here's another thing. If you're a guidance counselor in some of these public schools, and say you're from a blue collar town, like we'll use a reference to where we're at, Lyndhurst, New Jersey, your father works at UPS. You got 3 kids. One of your kids is pretty smart. He wants to go to Villanova at the cost of $75,000 a year and wants to study English. Wrong. You tell the kid straight out, son, no, your father is not a rich man. You're not going to get a job that's going to pay your debt back. You're going to be living in your parents' basement till you're 45.
Right. Unless you got a bestseller in your head at 21 years old, you ain't paying back that debt.
Which means you're going to wind up having to go to law school, which
Right.
means more debt. And you, again, your father doesn't have the cash to lay it out. You see,
Right.
it's a different time. And there's too much of that, like, oh, you could do anything. Wrong. It costs money.
Right. You
Everything
can't
costs money.
listen. You don't go look. Joe. Look, the ones that are selling this bill of goods, they know what they're doing. They know the natural reaction of a parent is going to be absolutely not. You're not taking gender studies. You're not taking all these ethnic studies. I don't care if it's white, black, Italian. You don't take Italian studies in college. Okay. That's not what you do. Now, if you are blessed to come from a wealthy family,
Then
and you
do it.
could go to a liberal arts college, and you could become a painter or a writer or this or a film director or whatever the case might be. Great, great. God bless you. Most people, middle class people, they got to get it out of their heads. And here's the important part, Joe. Stop letting the education establishment tell your son or daughter, don't worry if your parent can't pay for it. We'll lend you the money. That's a ticket to lifelong slavery.
Absolutely.
Right there.
I mean, it's just a
Lifelong
fact.
slavery.
And,
And they know it, Joe. And they know it.
Absolutely. I mean, again, there's a practical element to being a middle class person. There's a practical element to be a working class family. You're not, listen, if I made $900,000 a year and my son wanted to study philosophy at, say, wherever, pick the school, a great school, could be Columbia, study philosophy, great, great. But here's the thing. In this house, you have to pay your schooling back, and it's a lot of money.
That's right.
And here's another thing, the behavior. It's the behavior. Decisions are made in college that could affect you for the rest of your life. Women have abortions left and right. I knew women who had abortions in college.
That's why Planned Parenthood wants a major presence on college campuses, because they want to be there for when those chicks go out to the parties, get drunk, have sex, get pregnant, and then you go running down to Planned Parenthood and problem solved.
And also drug
issue.
use is rampant on college campuses.
Right.
Rampant. You can get arrested.
And it's legal now. Back in the day, it wasn't. Scranton, Seton Hall, okay, or whatever school. Back when we went to school, Joe, smoking pot wasn't legal. Now I'm sure they could do it in the quadrangle.
Well, it's, again, what I have seen, and I did live it, and I went through it. Most kids are too young and immature for it. My observation, it doesn't matter what school it is. It could be, like I said, University of Pennsylvania. It's an Ivy League school. Lehigh University, one of the better engineering schools in America. Very challenging and difficult to get into those schools. They're smart kids. The behavior's off the hook. And again, if you're Catholic and you basically teach your kids a certain ethic, how to live, you're sending them out. I'm going to tell you right now, that quote unquote rite of passage is not moving them forward. Period. End of story. And I got news for you. I went through it, and I'll be truthful to you. I don't want that rite of passage for my kids.
No.
I'm being honest with you.
No, Joe,
I went through it, and I'm not saying I'm depriving them. I don't think it's beneficial for you. It took me years after I got back from college to basically get my head straight and basically get buckled down again into like frigging reality.
Right.
Living in this wacko reality of like getting up at 11:30 every day, doing whatever the hell you want till 4 a.m, just on a Tuesday.
Right.
I mean, like, listen, I'm not paying for it. Period. End of story. You want to go to school? You live home, and you could go to school at Rutgers Newark. And if you want, you could become anything and do anything from that launching pad.
Joe, I couldn't agree anymore. When I went to Seton Hall, Joe, I spent my first 4 years on that campus in South Orange from 81 to 85 at Seton Hall Prep on the South Orange campus. Okay. Joe, it was 4.5 miles from my house. That's Seton Hall Prep High School. When I went to Seton Hall University, you know what my commute, Joe, was? 4.5 miles. I still commuted from North Newark to Seton Hall University, and I did that for my 6 years. Now, Joe, I was a screw up, so I'm not judging any of these kids. But here's the difference, though. Okay, is that I came to a realization later on in life. When I say later on, as I was spiraling down a staircase that I should not have. Okay. I thought to myself, well, why did my father tell me all these things? Why did my mother tell me all these things? Okay. They weren't saints. So they try to emphasize to me, as we're going to try to emphasize to our children, don't do it. I'm telling you it's going to happen. Don't test the theory. Just don't do it. Don't go to that party. Don't get stupidly drunk. Don't do drugs. Don't have sex. Study. Come out. And then afterwards, we'll talk about how you're going to live the rest of your life. Joe, if you say that now, I mean, what's wrong with telling kids, why do you have to go down this path? As you mentioned earlier, Joe Resinello, on the Crusade Channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com. Why do you have to go down that path? Why do you have to think in your mind as a parent that it's a rite of passage? How about just shut your kids down? And I think if you want to segue, Joe, into Anthony Esselin's
Yeah, I was
article,
just going to do that.
I think that's what he's saying. He's saying the moral edifice is gone. It's not that it's crumbling anymore. It's actually gone. And he makes a comparison I want you to get into, Joe, about saints and sinners, about how we're not trying to say people were pure 50, 60 years ago, but there's a difference, Joe. What's the difference?
Well, he basically gives. I love the picture he paints. He basically says, when I was a boy, the edifice of sexual morality was crumbling. I knew very well that there was such an edifice, and it governed what boys and girls did, and it set them up for marriage. And I want to touch upon that in a little bit. There were still some dances. Boys and girls still went on dates, which meant bowling, miniature golf, movies, picnics, restaurants, and what was called necking took place. A healthy culture may breed a latent cancer here and there, but a sick culture is cancerous all over. But this, with basically, he's basically saying that this is like an outpost of sanity here and there. I mean, like in that time, there was like, but in a healthy culture, a boy walks up to a girl and awkwardly and nervously asks her to a dance. In a sick culture, the girl demands a nude video from the boy. And because he doesn't want to look like a prissy idiot, he just gives it to her and he complies.
Right.
And then he goes on to say, I'm not talking like a conservative, but merely as a human being who wants to promote marriage and to protect as far as possible the sacred innocence of the youth. And that's what I want to talk about, Joe, marriage.
Right.
This behavior does not prepare you for marriage. You see, marriage, if you want a healthy marriage and a long haul marriage, behaving like that and thinking you're just going to flick the switch and have a healthy marriage and have virtues developed and basically every day come home from work, take the garbage out, help your wife with the chores, help your wife with the kids after you come home from work. Wrong.
Mm-hmm.
You're undisciplined.
Right.
And frankly, that is exactly what he's talking about. You're not setting your children up for marriage. Who goes on dates in college? I never heard of anyone doing that in 4 years of college. In fact, there's a documentary out there out of Boston College that a professor talks about that. Kids don't know how to interact in a healthy manner.
Right.
How are they going to have a healthy marriage?
Well, listen, I mean, when you send your son or daughter to school, okay, and what you do is you basically you remember, Joe, as we say all the time on the show, you're the primary educator as the parent, okay? You have to be the one to tell your son or your daughter, no, if you jump into bed with another human being and and you're not married, you're using that person. You're treating that person as an object. You're dehumanizing that person. See, these are the messages that we need to give to our children, okay? Is that kind of a message. Say, in other words, ring the bells that the left rings, Joe. Oh, to be fully human means you have to go out and have sex. Your ass, that means you got to go out and have sex. What are you doing telling that to my son or my daughter? That's not the way it works. And Joe, shame on a parent that tells that to their daughter. I had a friend of a friend don't ask me how this happened, Joe. This was a couple years ago. I have no clue. It's one of those funny stories. Joe, I'm a pretty tolerant guy. You can't come into my house and start spewing this nonsense if you're a liberal. You start talking about that sex is a rite of passage for your daughter and abortion is available and contraception. My first impulse is I want to kick you out of my house. Okay. And I'm being serious. And there was somebody who here, it was a friend of a friend, and it was a little get together we had. And this is what this person was saying. At one point, I had to literally go check my stomach. I walked out of the room. I walked into our room, and I kind of just laid down for a minute. I had a headache because I'm saying to myself, this is a girl who's saying this and has a daughter, and she's teaching that to her daughter. What kind of girl is the daughter going to grow into if that's what her mom's teaching her? And that's what this article is about, Joe. This article is about, it's not the kid's fault. We were all young. Nobody's a saint here, okay? This is not the kid's fault. This is the parents' fault. The parents and the university, Joe.
You know, I liked what Jose Gonzalez, we had that interview with him, with Sophia Teachers Institute. And what he said is, like I asked him that question when you teach young people, particularly in high school, about sex. The best sex, to be honest with you, is sex that's open to life.
Right.
If you want to have a good marriage and have the best sex, that's the best sex. I got news for you. Sex that uses one another, even within the marriage covenant, is not as fulfilling. You see, that is, I think, the way to basically put out to kids. I think the don't do it mentality doesn't necessarily work. And Jose said that, and I agree with him, because people, frankly, they have to touch the stove. And a lot of times they get burned. They get involved in bad relationships. They get hurt. They're wounded. Who
Yeah.
gets an abortion? All types of nonsense goes on. The emotions that are involved with people who are involved in sexual relationships that linger for years and years, and they don't evolve into marriage, all of which are unhealthy. But I think the best way is to say, if you want to have the best type of marriage, if you want to have the best type of sex, do it God's way, and you will have it all. You'll have it all.
Right.
But instead of doing it that way, we go to the garbage can and we eat out of the dumpster.
Let's talk about the dumpster for a second, Joe, because this is important, okay? Because I'm a little tired. Again, Joe, there's nothing that any of these sexually liberated types could really tell me, okay? I'm not going to speak for you, okay? But my 20 years between 18 and 38 years old, not exactly pure as the driven snow Catholic, if you know what I'm trying to say. There's nothing they could tell me. You just made a good point. You go back to the dumpster. They make it out like this is what I mean about these feminists. They make out these hookups and this hookup culture that somehow it's so gratifying. I'd love to say to some of these, and I have said to at least a couple of guys that were younger than me that were living this lifestyle, said, "Why do you want to leave the next day so quick?" Like, and you want to talk about deer in the headlights, Joe? Like, in other words, like, I'm just trying to be real, Joe. I'm just trying to talk like man to man, right? In other words, like talk to somebody. Why is it that when you're done, quote unquote done, all right, and you're a guy, why do you want to, if it's so beautiful and wonderful and fulfilling, why do you want to get the hell out of there? And if you do end up staying until the next morning, why are you so in a rush to get out of there the next morning? What's so great and wonderful about it? You can't even look at that woman who the night before you couldn't stay away from. And the same with the girls. Why does it shock you when that guy rejects you? When you go to call him the next day and he says, "Yeah, I'm busy. I can't get together." Like, this is the dumpster you're talking about, Joe. This is the dumpster. In other words, because we have to try to convince these kids, are you stupid? Now, I know we should be more patient. Don't get me wrong, Joe Resinello. We try to have to be patient and loving, okay? But sometimes you want to say to some of these kids, are you just flat out stupid? Do you think you're going to find real love in all this? Do you think you're going to find any sort of fulfillment in all this? Say that to a girl and say that dude in about 3 hours isn't going to want to have anything to do with you. I say the same thing to the guy. And parents don't bother telling this to their daughters and telling this to their sons. How many fathers turn around to their sons, Joe, and say, "Just make sure you wear a condom, Johnny. Go out there, go get them." How many fathers do that? Okay? That's that dumpster that you're talking about. And it's for guys like us who've been around the block a couple of times to let them know, you want to go down a dead end. You want to go down a dead end street and be real lonely when you get down the end of that street, okay? Live this type of culture. Live this hookup culture that they're trying to ram down your throat.
You hit it right on the head. It's a dead end. All sinful lifestyles are a dead end, and they're meant to be, because you're supposed to get to the end of yourself at them and basically reflect and turn around. But here's the thing. Why do you have to go down that road? You see, this is what's being promoted in the college, the best colleges. It doesn't matter. Your kid, I see it on Facebook all the time. My kid's going to this school. My kid's going to that school. Listen, I partied at the mall. I know what's going on at the mall. It doesn't matter. The best one out there to the easiest one to get into. All that behavior is a dead end. And as Esselin said, it's not preparing you for marriage.
Right.
If you want to get married, and most people do, if you ask them that sincerely at, like, say, 18, do you one day want to have kids? Do you one day want to get married? Well, guess what? Your behavior now isn't helping the situation. In fact, It's not just, people say, oh, I got to, and life
That's right.
happens. You're going to see some fool that you met in a bar that you like to screw in
Right.
plain English, and that person is going to, what's it called, stick by you when times get tough, when you're up against the wall. I mean, this is a rite of passage in America. This
Right.
is what you're paying $80,000 of your hard-earned money to send your kids into a frigging jungle.
And let me tell you something, Joe. Listen, I shouldn't say it like this. I do feel bad for those people. In my heart, I laugh at those people because they're not uninformed. They're not ignorant. They know what's going on out there, and they'll still foot that $80,000 bill. But you know who's laughing at them even more? The colleges themselves.
Oh, they
The
take advantage,
colleges
and the bank.
themselves are laughing their ass off, said all the way to the bank. The banks are laughing their ass off because they're going to collect all that interest on those hundreds of thousands of dollars in student loans. And what did you do? Like, what did you do with your 4 years of college? I know what I did with it. Okay. Thank God I didn't have I didn't have a lot in student loans. I wound up paying for a lot of it myself. You want to know why? Because I was such a bum in college. My father wouldn't pay the bill for me. He paid for my brother to go to Yale, paid for my sister to go to Fordham. My father says, you don't want to study? I'm not paying anything. Now, he ended up giving me a few bucks later on in college because I actually did do better later on. But my point is this, though, okay? It's like they laugh at you. They laugh at you. There's Joe. I know kids that are in their 30s. They're still paying off their student loans, and
Oh,
they've diligently paid off their loans, or since they graduated, and
Joe,
they're in
when
their
you're talking
30s, and
about
they're paying.
$300,000 at 6% interest, I got news for you. Unless you're making a lot of money, and some people do, let's be honest, most don't. I got news for you. There are people, listen, I know lawyers. I work with lawyers. They do exactly what I do. Joe, they're lawyers.
Right,
That means they have a lot more debt than me. I'm just saying, it is expensive, and it's not. And here's another thing: just because you're smart, just because you have a good degree, doesn't mean you're going to make money. There's an aggressive behavior. You have to be, to make money in business, aggressive.
right,
If you don't have a kid that is like aggressive, and that kid, because you're co-signing that loan,
right.
don't assume just because they're smart they're going to go into some company and make money.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't work that way.
Not even listen. That kid is going to get into the workforce, and you know what they're going to get? Their ass handed to them.
Many
They won't.
times.
They won't even. Their head's going to spin so fast. They're going to say, "It's like the David Byrne song. It's like the song from Talking Heads when remember when he says, 'This is not my beautiful house. This is not my beautiful wife,' and he's got to he doesn't know where he is. Okay, it's the same thing the same principle when these kids get out into the workforce. This is not what I was promised. I was promised a $200,000 a year job. I was promised respect and prestige. In other words, this is what I was promised as we're here at the front line with Joe and Joe Pasillo, Joe Resinello in the breach. Because when you're talking about the things we talk about in American culture, you're going in the breach on the Crusade channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com, the last live radio station standing. That's the thing, Joe. They get out there and you know what happens? Joe, these people need our prayers. They're 22 years old, Joe, going out into the workforce. If you think that your potential boss is going to talk to you like your professors did, you're out of your mind.
But here's
You're
the thing:
out
at
of
that
your
point,
mind.
you've already pulled the trigger. You owe $300K, Joe. You see, this is what I'm saying. I'm not, and don't think that I'm not talking about getting a higher education. You have to do it within your means. You also have to do something if you're not a wealthy person, you're a middle class person, you're a working class person. You have to realize the bank wants its money.
Right.
It doesn't matter what your degree is in or from. That and 275 gets you to the Bronx on the subway. The bank wants its money. And here's another thing: that money, you can't file bankruptcy. You owe that money.
That's it.
You owe that money. And
the only way you get out of that debt, in other words, is if you die.
And that's it. And this is what I'm saying. The conversation has to be brought down to reality. you do realize you have to do the math. If you take out $300,000 with interest, this is going to be your monthly payment. It might be $700 a month
for the next 20, 30 years.
That means you have to make X amount of money to live.
Joe, that's why on this show, that's why what we have to do is we have to challenge assumptions. We have Pat Allenhurst in the chat room. Pat said, "How about trade schools?" Pat, it's the first time I'm seeing you. You must have been watching the Frontline with Joe and Joe. We've been saying that so many times. Why, if your kid doesn't have the wits, the knowledge, the intellect to become a lawyer, to become a doctor. Now, again, there's a lot of lawyers out there. There's no guarantee you're going to make money as a lawyer, but let's assume you could do okay. Let's assume you could do okay as a doctor. You could do okay as an accountant, and some of these professions, okay? Unless your kid's going to do that, I know contractors that crush these people. I know plumbers that crush these people, okay? I got my cousins are contractors, okay? They didn't go to college. They do very, very well and have done very, very well. They got out and they got a trade, and they started working their ass off when they were in their 20s. And that's why they've done well. And there's a lot of people like that. Why are we not taking the money away from higher education and pouring it into the creation of trade schools? Well, here, give me an example, Joe, and answer this question for me. Why do we give $100 billion a year? The federal government gives $100 billion a year. $2 billion to the University of Maine, $1 billion to Harvard, $700 million to Yale. Notre Dame gets that money. We talked about Catholic education. Georgetown gets that money. Why are we giving $100 billion a year to these institutions that are doing nothing for our kids? Why don't we take that $100 billion, take it away from them, and create trade schools? Because guess what, Joe? Water has to flow in a house. And you know what you need when that doesn't happen? A plumber. You have to build a house, and you know what you need? A contractor, a carpenter. Things break. Your car breaks down. You need a mechanic, okay? How about we maybe get back to that in this country? We used to do it. It doesn't seem like we do it anymore. We let these people sink their fangs and their claws into our kids.
Well, let's also circle back to like the so-called Catholic college. Why are Catholic high schools allowing kids to go into that type of debt to attend a Catholic college, knowing that their parents aren't rich and knowing they're not going to make that money?
Right.
Like, it's, to be honest with you, I don't understand it. Because listen, where we live, it's solidly middle class, Joe. We don't live in like Upper Bergen County. We're not living in like West, Hunterdon County, where, parents are making big money. They're just signing the, the bill. At the end of the day, you got to pay that money back. These schools, these Catholic schools, are sending their kids out into schools they can't afford to pay that money back. And let's talk about what they're going to learn there. Let's talk about the behavior. You want your kid to come out and be a responsible, upstanding kid who respects people, who basically is going to be a disciplined husband or wife, devoted, sacrificial. Are you learning that there? Hell no. Hell no. Wrong.
Joe, Esselin actually addresses that. I think this is important to read this for our audience out there on the Crusade Channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com. I think this hits the nail on the head. And Joe, it goes to what you were just saying. The difference between a healthy culture and a sick culture is not that the former is full of saints and the latter is full of devils. Here's the key. It's that the healthy culture raises high walls against evil and consciously directs its young people to what is good and noble, faithful and pure, while the sick culture hardly raises any wall, and worse than failing to direct the young, they push them into some participation in the wickedness. And he goes on from there. And Joe, that's the main thing to understand. That's the distinction to be made. Joe, a Catholic college is going to have a hard enough time in America in this culture, okay? And I'm talking about an upstanding Catholic college, whether you talk about Christendom and some of these others, okay? The better ones. Notre Dame, Georgetown, they do nothing to raise the walls that need to be raised that Esselin is talking about. They do nothing to instill in these 18, 19-year-old girls and 18, 19-year-old boys that are going to Notre Dame, hey, you know what? Sex is not really a good idea before you're married. In fact, you're at a Catholic institution, all right, and it's prohibited here. Joe, you want to see like the brains fall out, like of all the left in America, and even a lot of people on the right too. Okay, if the Catholic Church actually did that, if Notre Dame did that, if Georgetown did that, if Seton Hall did that, and other schools did that, okay, We don't need, this is the shame of it. And this is, I'm going to hand it over to you. Esselin makes the point. Okay. We don't, even Catholic schools don't raise the walls to protect our children. They're just as guilty as everybody else, Joe Resinello.
But ultimately, it's our job, as in, i.e., the parents, to protect our children. And that's, again, I don't see, like, and I look on social media, are people knowingly sending these kids out into a place, to be honest with you, they get eaten alive. I've seen it with my own eyes. In fact, I was a part of it. You eat these kids alive in these schools, and they come out a basket case in many respects. Many wounds are the result. And here's another thing. It doesn't matter that you're smart. It doesn't matter. You see, people sometimes, they think just because their kid's smart and they get into a good school, oh, everything's going to be okay. Wrong. They do drugs too. They party hard too. And they're having sex as well.
Hey, Joe, let me ask you a question. If you're an employer, a prospective employer for one of these kids, they're 22, 23 years old, coming into your office, super duper smart. Okay, let's just say on paper, super duper smart. And let's say you talked about what they're studying, and they come into your office, and you could potentially hire them, give them a really good job, okay? And they start talking about the nonsense that they learned in school and woke ideology and all this stuff. Give me a kid who's not on paper, as, let's say, as smart as that kid, but somebody who's got some horse sense, doesn't spew all that nonsense, is willing to work hard. I'm hiring that kid.
I'll even put it out this way. Give me a kid who went to NJIT, worked during the day, went to school at night, and in 5 years got an engineering degree. That kid sits in front of me and says, yeah, I helped pay for my school. I worked during the day. I went to school at night, and I'm an engineer. And then you get another kid who went to Lehigh, whose parents paid for everything. And on paper, they have exactly the same grades. I'm hiring the kid from NJIT.
Right.
Without a question.
Sure.
Without a question. Because there's a certain amount of character that is involved in that type of kid. There's also a certain amount of, frankly, discipline that you're not going to get. And here's the thing. It's gotten too expensive. It's frankly too darn expensive. And you know something? And this was all about, I read an article in First Things about that college SAT cheating scam. Parents feed into it because it adds to their own prestige. It's not necessarily just about their kid. Obviously, they want their kid to do well. I get it. I got 5 kids. I want my kids to do well. I want them to reach their potential. But parents want bragging rights. They want to go to the Starbucks and drink their goat milk latte at Starbucks and brag that little Johnny is going to Joe Blow's school and he got a 1,500 on his SATs, and oh gosh, look at me and how great I am.
Right.
It's about them as much as it's about the kid. And again, you have to look at the economics behind it. Ultimately, what are you studying? Like, when people tell me, I'll be honest with you, I'm going to be straight up. Again, I come from a working class background, so please keep that in mind. Again, I had student loans and I paid them all back. And by the way, my wife had student loans and we paid them back too. Right. So we owe nobody nothing, and we paid our bills. But here's the thing. I hear these kids, what are you studying? Sociology. What the hell are you going to do with that?
Right.
What are you going to do?
Right.
Oh, what are you studying? Oh, I'm studying psychology. What are you going to do with that? Like, you tell me, no. I'm studying to be an architect. Now we're talking. What are you studying? Engineer. Ooh, now we're talking. I got my CPA. Boom. Good stuff. What are you studying? Chemistry. Bam. Okay. If you're not rich, and I'm not, or if you're not, you have parents that aren't rich, listen, I'll be honest with you, you're living a pipe dream. That kid's going to come out, he's going to be, or she's going to be in your house till they're 40.
Right.
They're going to be working some job, making $90,000 a year, which is a good living. Don't get me wrong. But if you owe $275,000 because you got a degree in history from friggin' Tulane, go to Tulane. You're smart. Give me 275. Get on the ticket. Get on the subway and go to the Bronx. I don't care. Here's your $90,000 a year. That's all you're going to get.
Right. And you better live on your mother and father's couch on $90,000 a year, because most of that money, if you want to pay that student loan off pretty quickly, you're going to have to live on your parents' couch and devote all your money, 3, 4 years, 5 years, whatever it takes. Okay. Remember, the government's going to take a big bite in taxes out of that 90 grand. You still got to pay some food to mommy and daddy to live there, or some money to them. So what are you really doing? You're going to spend 5 years paying that. Let's say you devoted all of it, Joe. All of it to paying back that loan. You just wasted 5 years of your life because you came out, you didn't get the job they promised you. You basically found out the hard way. Why don't you just listen to all the voices out there, including the Frontline with Joe and Joe? Don't do it. Don't do it. Okay. But that's not what we do. Like you said, Joe, as you mentioned the latte. I will say it like John Kennedy. You're going to drink your soy pumpkin latte with your girlfriends and brag about your son or your daughter going to Notre Dame. That's what they're going to do. And my attitude is this: who cares? I'm not impressed. I'm not. Joe, I'm much more impressed. I'm much more impressed with working people in my life. And one good thing about the Frontline with Joe and Joe is I've interacted with people, okay, where, you know what? They don't care about this stuff. Now, some of them are super duper smart. Don't get me wrong. Some of them are super duper wealthy. All right. But at the end of the day, they don't care about any of this stuff. They have their feet firmly planted on the ground. Why? At the end of the day, because they're good Catholics. There's a difference in worldview when you're a faithful Catholic or when you're dealing with a superficiality known as the American culture.
Well, listen, again, education is good. I got it. I have a graduate degree. In fact, I have 2, but I paid for them. I lived home, I worked, and I went to school at night, and I paid for them. The bottom line is this: you have to be realistic, and we're not seeing it. Also, look into the behavior of what's going on those campuses. It's not good. And I'm going to tell you this right now. I don't care about your kid. Oh, my kid's so good. Oh, this, that, and the other thing. Pressure is immense. And they're alone, and they're not with you.
Right.
And I got news for you. It's real. And your kid doesn't come back the same. Believe it, because I lived it.
Joe, one of the dearest people in my life, okay, I'm not going to mention any names. One of the dearest people in my life went to Catholic grammar school, Catholic high school, and Catholic college, okay, and came out and was lost, okay? And I pray for this person all the time. Somebody I'm very close to and I love very dearly, okay? I pray for this person all the time. Catholic, if we look, it's going to be very hard to change the public schools, let's say the secular schools, the Harvards and the Yales. But at the very least, we should be doing something about Catholic education in America, because Georgetown, Notre Dame, Fordham, Seton Hall, Scranton, and the rest of them, they're not doing their job. They're not, 100%. Joe, they're not fulfilling their mission.
100%. And here's the thing: parents, stop giving them the money.
Right.
You see, it comes down to that. I'll be truthful with you. When my kid goes, if in terms of Catholic schools, we're going to look at the Newman list. We'll look at some things, but here's the thing. Again, I'm not a rich man. You got to go to school to get a job. That's the bottom line. I cannot support you forever. And most parents are in that boat. And that means you got to study something that's hard and real. Now, listen, if you're rich, it's different. It's different. If I make $1 million a year and my kid wants to study some esoteric subject, French literature at, I'm going to make it up, Bard, some fancy ass liberal school, and I could pay the bill. First of all, I wouldn't send them to Bard because they'll come out jackass backwards. When they come back into my house, I won't even recognize my kid. But if you're going to pay that bill, then good. But if you're Joe Resinello's kid who has 5 kids and he's breaking his ass to send your kid to school and saved, and I'm spending all my 401k money, which means I'm going to eat Raymond noodles with no teeth in my mouth when I'm 80. Sorry, you got to study something to get a job. And if you don't know what you are going to do, you're not going now. You're going to go to community school, go to the service, think about it, work, take a gap year, volunteer for a year, all good things. Right. But you go, if you're a middle class kid and you're a working class kid, you go to school to get a job, and you don't impoverish your family, and you have to take loans that you could pay back. It's common sense.
It
There
is.
is no more common sense.
It is common sense, and we need to get some of our conservative, quote unquote, conservative leaders in this country to start doing something. There are those who talk about it, Joe. There are those. Okay, Joe. Let's move on. I want to get to this. Unless you want to make any
I
final
just want to
thoughts
make
on that.
one more point. I
Sure.
met also kids that go to some of these Newman schools at like things that I've done in religious circles, and you'll meet some kid. I just want to make this comment: a boy, and young boy. What are you studying? Marianology. I kid you not. I was on a pilgrimage, and this kid's telling me this, and I'm thinking to myself, well, I hope one, your father's rich, as he's telling me this, and you're going to become a priest. Because if you're going to teach in a Catholic school, they're going to pay you about $30,000 a year. You're never going to be able to pay back this tuition. And if you do get married and you have children because you're open to life, I got news for you. Diapers are $50 a box. So what the hell are you doing? Like you're studying math? Great. Read books about Mary. I do, but I'm not paying $50,000, $60,000 a year to do it.
That's
It's also
that's
there
the point.
too. What are you thinking?
Right.
You hear these kids like, oh, everything's beautiful. It's beautiful. Blah, 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 blah. Okay. It costs $300,000 a year to go to Steuben, or $200,000 a year. Great. You're studying about Mary. Are you going to be a priest? Who's going to pay that bill? What kind of job are you going to get? You want to have kids? You want to have 8, 9 kids? Oh, okay. Who's going to pay for that?
Right.
You studying Marianology? Who's giving this kid direction?
All right. That is a lack. And yeah, it's a shame to say, because like I said, studying Marianology is a great thing. Not when you're borrowing $200,000 a year to go to school. And then, and like you said, if your mother and father are now, if your parents are rich and you say, Daddy, I want to be a priest.
Bless you.
Knock yourself out. I mean, all right, I'm rich. You want to be a priest? Go ahead. You want to spend $100,000 a year on education? I got you. Don't worry about it. Study Marianology, study Christology, study eschatology, whatever you want. Okay, and then please become a great priest. Become the Pope, or do something like that.
Saying wonderful.
But no, that's where Catholics also have to keep our feet firmly on the ground. Also,
Joe,
and think very, very practically.
There are seminaries that won't take you in unless you have no debt. So even if you want to be a priest and you do that and you're not rich, they're going to say, I guess what? I can't take you in. You have too much debt. I'm sorry.
Right.
So again, where's the thinking? I don't see it out there. You talk to kids on all sides of it. I don't see it.
No, I agree with you 1,000%. So you're at the front line with Joe and Joe Pasillo and Joe Resinello. And man, are we in the breach on the Crusade channel. Always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com, the last live radio station standing. Remember, the chat room is open, crusadechannel.com/chat. Follow Joe and I on social media, particularly at the Frontline TV, on YouTube. That's our primary station that we're looking to build up. Thank the good Lord. We have now surpassed 60,000 subscribers, which is pretty awesome. And we're looking for more. We'd ask you to like, subscribe, share, do all that fun stuff. Now, Joe, I don't know about you, but I want to be a reactionary. I want to be a reactionary. You want to know why? I want to be all the things that liberals hate. Because the things that liberals hate, a lot of the things I hate too. Okay. The only difference is they don't really hate those things. They just pay it lip service. They hate reactionaries. You want to know why? Because the leftists, Joe, if you look at, let's say, left-wing ideology, philosophy, and leftist philosophers over the last 100, 200 years, okay, part of their view is that they want change for change's sake, not because there's necessarily something wrong, but their worldview is they want chaos. It's constant change, which usually means they have to destroy stability, which usually means that's why the target usually for them is the Catholic Church and other institutions, but primarily the Catholic Church. So you know what I want to be, Joe? I want to be a reactionary. They hate reactionaries because reactionaries react against unnecessary change. That's a key word, Joe Resinello. Unnecessary change. Okay. At some point in American history, African Americans could not vote. There's a necessary change that has to take place there. In other words, you have to abolish slavery and you have to give African Americans the right to vote. Now, that's necessary change. But when you want change to say, well, the kind of change I want means that boys could be girls and girls could be boys, I'm a reactionary now. Now I'm a reactionary. Why? Because number one, what you're doing is not really changing anything. You're lying to people. And the other thing is, even if that wasn't the case, it's unnecessary. We don't need to change certain things. That's what the reactionary I want to be. And Austin Ruse had something to say about this.
No, I hear you. I mean, he talks. I like how he basically uses the comparison of the Middle Ages, and he basically said like people during the Middle Ages, you could look at them. He says they shoveled hay, but they were
Right.
happy.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, what were some of the reactions? He uses the Renaissance. He uses examples of the Protestant Revolution, scientific revolution, the Enlightenment. A lot of those things, and this is the point of his article, brought people to some degree. There are many good things that came out of like science. Clearly, I mean, I'm not someone who like, trust me, I live 10 miles outside of New York City. I'm fully aware of what's going on in the world. I work in the world, but are they making us happier? Are all of these things, these advances, and that's kind of where he's going with it. People who lived a simpler life were happier. Now, you can do that here. I don't have a cell phone. I'm 51 years old. I do not have a cell phone. But I'm going to be honest with you, that requires a tremendous amount of discipline. You see, and the people who sell these things know that people don't have it. They're preying on you. We talked about that last week with the metaverse. All these marketing scams and these advertising scams and the debt that they drag people into. They know this. So they entice you in and you become a slave. You have to have a lot of discipline to live a simple life. It can be done, but it's hard, Joe. And I'm going to tell you this, like you said, people have to get the newest iPhone. People have to have all this. They have to be progressive. Well, progressive what? Progressive what? I'll be honest with you. A lot of those people, their lives are a friggin' mess, straight up and down.
They might have big bank books, Joe Resinello. All right. They might have super duper cars. Okay. And they got all this stuff. Okay. At the end of the day, that is the lie. We don't have a lot of time. I wanted to spend more time on this, but that's okay. But that's the lie, Joe Resinello, that our culture tries to sell to people. All right. That's part of the reason why they sell them into $300,000 worth of student loan debt, because somehow to possess things means that that's necessarily going to make you happy. So you're right. So let's say Austin Ruse, and he's commenting, by the way, I am going to give a plug for the book. I did see Michael Warren Davis in an interview with Tim Gordon. Interesting guy. They were talking about his book, what is it called? The Reactionary Mind. All right. And I do recommend it, but I saw this article because we like Austin Ruse and we like what he has to say. What makes you think that a serf was unhappy? What makes you think, and especially since if you look at the progress of human history, okay, a serf was a lot better off than a slave, okay? And even slaves under the Roman Empire were not like slaves in the 19th century and the 18th century, okay? You became a slave, but eventually, if you had a good owner, slave owner, whatever, master, you could buy your freedom. There were a lot of things. My point is this, is that society has developed, and now we're at the point where, okay, these people, these serfs, or even if you want to look at a couple generations ago from us, Joe Resinello, they accepted the hardships of life. Remember, you brought up last week, we were talking about the metaverse, okay, where, you don't, this is for people that don't want to accept the hardships of life. Even up till a couple generations ago, you accepted the hardships of life. You got up every day. You had some grit. You went out, you went to work. Your wife probably had a side job, okay, but she primarily raised the kids. She brought in a little bit of extra income. You went, yes, like Billy Joel likes to mock it in the song Allentown when he talks about his father spending his weekends on the Jersey Shore. My question is, what's wrong with that? In other words, you see, this is the problem. This is what we have to react against, okay? We're getting away from some simplicity, Joe Resinello. Family, faith in God first, okay? Family, work, friendship, community, local government. We're getting away from all these things for what? Because we're being sold a bill of goods. Oh, you're not really happy unless you have this, or unless you have that, or unless you have that. And that's the type of BS that Michael Warren Davis and Austin Ruse are pointing out. We have to react against that, Joe. We have to react against trying to destroy something that up till very recently was considered good, true, and beautiful.
But here's the thing, what isn't BS is those people aren't happy, Joe. You
You're
see,
talking about the
unless
rich people. You're
you
talking about
say
the elitists.
no, but people who basically are thirsting for all those things. Again, the businesses know this. If you're grounded in God, like I always say this, I want to retire in heaven. I'm not looking to buy a house in Miami. I don't even care about a fancy house where I live.
Right.
I am looking to retire. You see, it's where you're orientated to. You see, the simple life doesn't look good to the person who's worldly. If you're looking to build your castle here, you're not going to buy into what Joe and Joe are talking about. Live simply. Oh, a surf, what? Or even just a normal man that has children that comes home and helps, basically, is a good neighbor and
Right.
is
Right.
just
Right.
mows
Right.
the lawn and is a quiet guy. Like that life isn't attracted to you. You're looking to build your castle here. That's because our society is devoid of God. God is a word, and everyone goes to heaven, no matter who you are or what you do,
Right.
which is completely not what Jesus Christ taught. Read the gospel.
Well, I'll tell you what. I do like what Rue's commenting on this. Michael Warren Davis's book, what he says. Couple things I think is important. It's along the lines of what you're saying. Okay. Um, he says Davis says he would rather be a plumber than a writer. Goes back to what we were talking about earlier. He said as a boy he worked as a farmer. He says it's the best job he ever had. Now here's a line that I like, Joe, and I think, and then I'm going to leave it to you because then we'll have a couple minutes and we could end it there. He says Davis, and again, I think Davis might be watching the front line with Joe and Joe. Davis believes we have become too soft. Softness is unmanly. He says if you're a man, get punched in the face at some point in your life, it's good for you. Now, does that mean you have to go out and physically get punched in the face? But no. But the thing is, get beat up a little bit by life. Stop thinking that somehow you're going to live vicariously through your kids because you're sending them to Boston College and you think that life's not going to kick you right in the face. And I think what he's trying to say is in America, Joe, that's a lot of what's out there. In other words, people think they're going to, you made a good point. They think they're going to coast through life and then they're going to float into heaven. And it's as easy peasy as that. Joe, I'm going to hand it over to you for a couple comments and then we got to bring it to an end.
Well, my father always used to say, no one goes through this life unscathed. It doesn't matter who you are. And frankly, it's that experience that makes you who you are. And that's why, in my view, a middle-class upbringing is the best upbringing because you know what the word no means because life shows it to you. I don't have the money for that. I have to work. And if I don't work, there is no safety net.
Right.
You see, this is real. And this molds you to be the person, frankly, that I want to be and I want my kids to be. We don't have that anymore. People basically want their kids to be too comfortable. And frankly, that's why they're failing because they don't know what it means to get quote unquote punched in the face by life.
That's
by
right.
life. The word no. No, you can't have that. No, you're not getting that job. So what does it mean? Hustle. Get out there. Start making it happen. We don't have a generation that is equipped for it. That's why we're in the trouble we're in.
Well, Joe, that's why we have to keep fighting at the front line with Joe and Joe. We have to keep encouraging, particularly men. Remember, this show started at the prompting of a very good Catholic priest who said, guys, you got to talk to Catholic men out there in particular. You got to say the word. You got to get it out there. It's the gospel message. It's the message of Christ. It's the message of the church. There's a way to get through this life, Joe, and go to heaven. You want to know what? I lived it the wrong way for a long time. All right. You had your bout with it early in your 20s, whatever. But a lot of this has become what what Esselin was saying. It's so becoming seeped into our culture that now right is wrong, wrong is right, good is evil, good. In other words, and it just, life does not work that way. And that's why we, along with a lot of other people, we have to stand up. And I think we should be reactionaries. I think when they want to do the things that they're doing, yes, of course, on the political level, okay, but mostly on the cultural level, start raising kids that are going to be different and let your kids know you might get punched in the face because there are bullies out there. Don't worry about it. You're going to be better off for it. Speak the truth. Live a better life. Don't go with the culture. Go against it. That's, I think, the best thing we could do. And then hopefully we could turn the ship around. I think we can. I think there's a lot more good out there than not.
Oh, there's no doubt, but kids have to see that in their parents. I
Yes.
mean, their parents basically go along with the sheeple. I mean, like if you think your kid is not going to be everyone says don't be a follower, be a leader. Are you a leader?
Right.
Do you follow the crowd as a parent? It's
Right.
learned in the house. If your parents aren't following the crowd, odds on your kids won't.
Well, then let's be reactionary. Let's go against the grain and let's raise reactionary children. And with that, we're going to leave you all. We want to thank you for joining us at the front line with Joe and Joe. Please, 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 we ask you for one little piece of support, which will take you about 20 seconds. Go on Frontline TV, the Frontline TV on YouTube, okay? And that is our primary social media. We've now passed 60,000 subscribers, okay? We get thousands of views every time we put something up there. It's phenomenal. We have to thank you for it. But please share and like and subscribe and do all that fun stuff. Tell your friends about the Frontline with Joe and Joe, okay? And we want to thank you all for listening to us on the Crusade Channel, your home for the Mike Church Show, Crusade Channel News, the Barrett Brief, and Kennedy Profession. From sun up to sundown, the Crusade Channel is the last live radio station standing.